everyone, I am Fatim Khaitaini, and today we're going to talk about diaspora. Have you ever stood in a kitchen that smells like home, only to realize you are thousands of miles away from where that recipe began? Maybe it is your grandmother's spice mix carried in an unlabeled jar, or a song that suddenly hits harder abroad than it ever did back home. You are physically here, but emotionally somewhere else. That in-between feelings of belonging and not belonging at the same time, that is where diaspora quietly lives. We often describe diaspora as movement, people living in one place and settling in another. But from a postcolonial perspective, diaspora is not just about distance on a map. It is about history traveling with people. Diaspora is memory with a passport. Its identity shaped by rupture, by survival, by adaptation. If a cultural theorist Stuart Hall remind us that identity is not an ascent, but a positioning. In diaspora, that positioning is never fixed. It shifts depending on who is asking, who is listening, and which borders, visible or invincible, you are crossing that day. Colonial history is central to this story. Large-scale diaspora did not happen simply because people wanted adventure. They were produced by empire. Slavery forced African peoples across ocean. Indentured labor moved South Asians to the Caribbean, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Colonial borders carved up communities and economies, making migration a necessity rather than a choice. Empire, as Edward Said observed, worked by dividing the world into us and them, and that division followed colonized people long after the flags were even lowered. For diasporic communities, identity often forms under unequal power. You learn early which parts of yourself are welcome and which must be softened, translated, or even hidden. Language becomes a negotiation, accents are judged, names are short, and even success can feel conditioned, as if you are being rewarded for proximity to a dominant norm, rather than for who you actually are. So diaspora then is not just cultural mixing, it is living with the afterlife of colonial hierarchy. This is where education becomes crucial. Schools are not neutral spaces, they are powerful storytellers. For a long time, education system informally colonized society and in the global north reproduced colonial narrative. History textbooks centered empire as progress. Literature syllabi privileged European voices. Knowledge itself was ranked, with Western ways of thinking positioned as universal and others as local, traditional, or supplementary. So post-colonial scholars have long pointed these things out. In cultural anthropology, James Clifford argued that diasporas create roots rather than roots, ways of knowing that are mobile, relational, and resistant to single origin stories. Stephen Vertovec, writing in ethnic and racial studies, showed how diasporic consciousness challenges the idea that identity must belong neatly to one nation, one language, one curriculum. But no, education can also be a site of repair. When students encounter history that name colonial violence honestly, something changes. So when classrooms include diasporic literature, oral history, and multiple epistemologies, learners begin to see knowledge as plural rather than hierarchical. Education becomes less about assimilations and more about interpretation, learning how to read the world critically, including the forces that shape why some people move and others stay. So think of education like a mirror. For many diasporic students, school has long been a mirror that reflects someone else's face. A post-colonial approach asks, what happens when that mirror finally reflects you back, with all your complexity, your hybridity, your contradictions? Not as a problem to be solved, but as a perspective that matters. Diaspora is often described as loss, but it is also a form of knowing. It teaches people how to live with multiplicity, how to translate between worlds, how to remember forward. If education takes that seriously, it stops asking diasporic students to choose where they belong. Instead, it asks a better question. What kind of future becomes possible when many histories are allowed to teach in school? And maybe that is the quiet challenge diaspora offers us all. Not to ask where someone is really from, but to ask which stories we are still refusing to learn.